Hi there, I'm Ken Krause, and I'm one of the voices of our feisty little SnapSessions podcast. Together with interviewer, writer, and commentator Doug Nunn and techmeister Marshall Brown, we produce the mix of politics, comedy, and interviews that is SnapSessions. Maintaining the good ship SS SnapSessions isn't free. Expenses include our website hosting, Zoom Pro account, transcription services for interviews, and other things that keep our podcast snapping. If you enjoy our quirky show, we'd like to ask you to become one of our Snap supporters. We've even added some membership levels to make it easier for you to join our Snap family through our Patreon link at patreon.com/SnapSessions. To help us produce our monthly antidote to the media madness, you can join our support team as a baby snapper for just $1 a month. For only $3 a month, you can become a Snip Snapper. We also have our existing levels of support through Patreon with the mighty Mini Snapper at $5 a month, the Simple Snapper at $10 a month, the Beefy Big Snapper at $20 a month, and for $35 a month, you can become an exalted Snappus Maximus. And for those of you wishing to make a one-time gift to our snappy cause, we now have a Buy Me a Coffee account at buymeacoffee.com/SnapSessions. You can contribute as much as you are able to, whenever you can. All our Snap supporters will receive credit on our website, thesnapsessions.com. For those who contribute at the upper levels, there are special rewards, such as credit on the podcast, early access to the episodes, unedited transcripts of the interviews, access to special music, and more surprises. Links to all support levels are on our website at thesnapsessions.com. And please know that we appreciate any support you can give. And we appreciate you listening to our Snaptastic offerings. We are grateful to you as listeners and hope you will help us keep making Snap Sessions a part of your auditory input. Now, on with the show. Yeah, who they heard of me.
Welcome to Snap Sessions, a podcast that looks at international artists and their creative pursuits, as well as interesting articles and broadcasts across the political spectrum. My name is Doug Nunn. I'm joined by voiceover colossus Ken Krause, by our behind-the-scenes techmeister Marshall Brown, and by our artist activist of the show, musician and inventor Gene Parsons.
Support for Snap Session is brought to you by listeners who contribute generously at our link, patreon.com/SnapSessions, or through the link in the Snap Sessions website, thesnapsessions.com, and also the link in our show notes. Thanks to our Snappus Maximus contributors, Ron Hochsprung and Rick and Henny Newman, and to our supportive snappers, Ellen Athens, Peter and Sheila Jowers, Kathy White, Dominique Jowers and John Bird, Gabriel Geiger, and Christine Samus. Other contributors include Steve Weingarten and Jerry Shook. These supporters help keep Snap Sessions snapping. Join the Snap Sessions family. In a world where a genetically modified cop thought he was too big for the law, only one reporter was willing to bring him down to size. A story of pastry and politics, of sweet treats and cheesy consequences. Snap Sessions presents the story of Copzilla!
An apartment in Donut Town. A ceiling fan lazily turns. We see a messy bed below, where a cartoon donut, Gil Glazy, rises. Next to him, his sultry girlfriend, Sugar Dough, sleeps dreamily. Gil walks across the sun-streaked room to a window as he pulls on his pants.
Just another rancid afternoon in the greasy city. Seems like there's always something wrong in our little pastry paradise.
In the street down below, two cartoony donut sedans crash head-on. The sugary occupants climb out and immediately begin shouting at each other. A cop car pulls up, sirens blaring.
Maybe it's my perspective. I've been a reporter for so long I didn't think I had any choice but to be a cynic. I'm Gil Glazy. I run the city desk at the Daily Deep Fry, and I've seen all the misery.
We see Gil working at the Daily Deep Fry, his hat brim pushed up as he types away at his desk. On the other side of the newsroom, donuts argue, cajole, and shove each other. The editor comes roaring out of his office.
I can't print this baloney! You guys write like a bunch of biscuits!
Back at his apartment window, Gil pulls on his shirt and wipes the sweat from his brow. Across the room, gorgeous Sugar Dough lounges asleep on the bed.
Thank God for my main squeeze, Sugar Dough. She was built like a French twist. I would have liked another roll with her on the wax paper, but I had investigating to do.
Gil finishes tying his tie and heads out the door as Sugar rolls over. Getting his car, he takes to the street, and the glare of Gil's headlights cut through the early dusk light.
I climbed into my Winchell sedan and drove through the Lower East Side. The poverty was incredible. Tough to maintain your integrity down there.
As he drives along, we catch scenes of Donut Town's urban life. He passes a crowd of maple bars and old-fashioned donuts on a street corner.
What's up, bro? You got a problem with something? What's up? Who you looking at like that, bro? Bro, who you looking at?
He pulls up to a stoplight, and two luscious and heavily made-up cake donut floozies step up to his window.
Come on, honey. Give me a chance and I'll suck the custard right out of you.
Thanks. But I'd like that about as much as I'd like being thrown back in the fryer.
He pulls away and drives by a group of degenerate donuts in an alley.
Crime, substance abuse. There's guys in the buttermilk neighborhoods who live and die for drugs. Guys shooting up yeast and snorting baking powder. Anything to get a rise out of life.
Gil pulls by the Jelly Roll Blues Club. The music breaks Gil's depression as he thinks of last night with Sugar Dough. Last night, Gil and Sugar Dough jitterbugged in the middle of a crowd of dancing donuts. Behind them in the throng stood a dapperly dressed but shady-looking Eclair.
Last night at the Jelly Roll with Sugar, I could have sworn I saw that Eclair, the head of Bear Claw Security. What was he doing there? I'm heading over to the factory to find out.
The memory of the Jelly Roll Blues Club fades as Gil pulls into the abandoned parking lot of the Bear Claw Security Agency, killing his lights. A large fence blocks access to the building, and floodlights are everywhere.
I've been chasing this story for weeks. Seems like Bear Claw's been working on some secret population control experiments. Working on ways to keep the riffraff and the Sugar and Glaze neighborhoods at bay.
As Gil sneaks around the building, he imagines what's going on the inside, picturing white-coated researchers mixing chemicals, while the mysterious and dapperly dressed Eclair looks on. His thoughts are broken when he notices a security guard walk by.
Gil pulls back into the shadows.
Dangerous work when you're an investigative reporter. I've covered cases of donuts found dunked in the river. It's not a pretty sight.
Gil pictures a riverside crime scene where police pull soggy donuts from the river. Gil shakes his head at the thought and then sneaks up to a rear entrance and begins trying to jimmy the lock.
You see, I didn't want Donut Town to go up in smoke, like that disaster in Terry Clare last month.
The Terry Claire disaster happened when a donut vat exploded. Sending dozens of berate French twists flying through the air. Back at the entrance, Gil cracks the lock and then edges his way through the door.
Bingo! There was something mighty fishy here. Connections with the mayor and his rich friends up in Eclair Heights and the Cheese Danish Hills.
Gil pictures rich donuts in a beautiful sports car as a debutante in white tennis shorts throws her racket in the back and hops in. He sees Mayor Cruller looking on proudly with his jutting jaw until finally his daydream disappears and Gil is walking among enormous vats of bubbling hot oil.
Suddenly, Gil stumbles upon a greasy vat and notes a sign.
Top secret biological weapons research. What the baker's dozen?
Gil leans forward for a closer look when suddenly a hand grabs him from behind. Gil quickly turns to belt his pursuer but pulls back when he sees who she is.
Sugar, what the heck are you doing here? I thought you were still sleeping.
Not if I know you're chasing a big story. You never know what or who might end up in the society column.
Their reunion is quickly interrupted by the gurgling of a vat marked Top Secret.
Oil splatters to the floor and the tank shakes. Gil and Sugar lurch back and forth, and then Sugar falls to the ground, and Gil falls back between the vats. As Gil tries to pull himself up, he looks up to see a pair of giant, shiny shoes, then continues looking past enormous blue trousers, a humongous belt buckle, and across a huge blue shirt to the chubby, hungry face of the enormous Copzilla. Gil stumbles backwards. He is suddenly grabbed from the side by the security guard, who is oblivious to the monster. Sugar slips and slides on the oily floor as Gil struggles with the excessively earnest security guard. From above, Copzilla notices the struggle, leans over and grabs the guard. The man is lifted higher and higher toward Copzilla's face until the monster stuffs the security guard in his mouth. Gil and Sugar stare in horror. Sugar begins slipping again as Copzilla leans over for her. Gil and Sugar lurch back and forth. Sugar! Sugar screams as Copzilla lifts her up, examines her, and then stuffs her into his shirt pocket. He looks around for Gil, who scurries behind another vat. Before Copzilla can give chase, he is distracted by an enormous styrofoam cup of coffee.
Copzilla stands to his full height, smashing through the roof, with the building falling away. Copzilla smashes his way out of the Bear Claw security building toward the nearby neighborhoods. He looks down at various donuts moving out of their houses, looking up from their jobs, pulling their cars over to see the towering Copzilla above them. Suddenly, the gawking crowd's amazement is broken when a huge, chubby hand reaches down and scoops up dozens of them. Copzilla dumps them in his giant cup of coffee and lifts them towards his mammoth mouth.
Horrified hordes of donuts disappear into Copzilla's mouth as they are chomped en masse. Donut military vehicles pull up. A well-decorated officer with spreckles on his epaulettes is looking through binoculars as his Jeep screeches to a stop.
Let's see what this big copper is made of. Eat spreckles, Porky!
A loud volley of high-caliber spreckles and sugar bullets bounces off the face and body of Copzilla. He drops the glazed twists he was chomping and leans toward the Jeeps, opening his mouth wider to absorb the bombardment. Suddenly, he lurches forward and grabs the officer, licks his sprinkled epaulettes, and shoves the soldier into his mouth.
Down below, Gil forces his way through the crowds of running civilians and retreating donut soldiers. He looks up just in time to see Sugar Dough screaming until Copzilla's laugh drowns her out.
At a press conference at Donut Town City Hall, confusion reigns as noisy reporters shout questions. A panel of scientists and military men are gathered around Mayor Cruller, including renowned scientist Dr. Rinaldo Biscotti. As far as we know, he may be 100 feet tall. That's over 300 cinnamon rolls laid end to end.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say we are dealing with the fabled Copzilla.
What is this, Copzilla?
That's impossible.
Surely that's a myth.
We've got General Friedrich Doman here. General Doman, what can you tell us about this horrifying situation?
As far as we can tell, the monster has destroyed most of the glazed sugar and maple bar districts. We have reason to believe he will sink the Bismarck sector next.
Any chance for reinforcements?
I'm afraid not. Communications with Bagelberg are cut off. And I'm sorry to say, our weapons are useless.
On a view screen above the press conference, Copzilla is seen smashing his way through the powdered donut neighborhood. The powder dust is so bad it obscures the monster. Suddenly, Copzilla rubs his eyes and pulls Sugar Dough out of his pocket.
Who the heck is that?
That, ladies and gentlemen, is my girlfriend, Sugar Dough.
Not Sugar Dough. Gossip columnist and wannabe starlet.
Damn straight.
On the big view screen above the crowd, Copzilla strokes Sugar Dough's hair as the mighty Kong once did to Fay Ray, and then licks her like a popsicle. The assembled throng is riveted with shock and revulsion until...
For the love of creamhorn wrapped on a Napoleon, think! Have any of you clowns thought about what might attract that big beluga away from Donut Town? Maybe he eats something other than donuts.
Avogado. Maybe we can allure him away with something other than a donut.
Oh, shut your cake hole. I think I've got an idea.
Suddenly the chaos becomes complete quiet. The landscape is nothing but smoke, desolation, and piles of rubble. Exhausted and despondent donuts pick through the pieces. In the distant background, Copzilla stomps through the rubble of Donut Town. Copzilla roams freely, smashing down the occasional helicopter, or grabbing them and stuffing them in his mouth.
Too bad it takes time to build a secret weapon. Plenty of time for Copzilla to digest innocent donuts and torture Sugar Dough.
Copzilla dunks Sugar Dough's flailing legs into a styrofoam cup, and then licks them.
Meanwhile, Mayor Cruller had surrounded Eclair Heights and the Cheese Danish Hills with his crack vegan brand muffin brigade. The only outfit Copzilla wouldn't touch.
Up in the Eclair Heights, we see Bran Muffins holding rifles in front of a country club, while the mayor and his cronies tee off. Copzilla is far away in the distance.
Good news for the Heights. Not so good for the Flatlands. The injustice. Someday I'll make the mayor's cookie crumble.
The next day, the sun rose on a desolated donut town, with Copzilla rampaging in the suburbs. He sits on a half-crushed building in the jelly roll section, nursing his seemingly bottomless cup of coffee. Around him, donuts continue to flee, some running amid outcrops of rubble. Meanwhile, various jeeps, tanks, and other armored vehicles spew an endlessly ineffective stream of exploding spreckles and sugar bullets.
Abruptly, we hear the sounds of Monday Night Football announcers.
We've got two evenly matched teams playing their finest football.
Conference title is at stake here, folks. Suddenly, Copzilla stands to his full height, swats away an ineffectual pastry airplane, and stares at an immense balloon sports bar. It lies just outside the city limits and has a large neon sign reading Murphy's Sports Bar. Hot wings, nachos, big screen Monday Night Football.
A shot in the dark? Maybe. But I thought it was the only chance to lure Copzilla away from the poor people of Donut Town.
Gil strides through the rubble as donuts flee all around him. An open-topped convertible limo, occupied by glamorously rich custard donuts, tries to honk its way through the crowd. Move along, muffiny rabble.
From above, Copzilla notices the delicious occupants. On a bluff above the city, military brass watch the scene with binoculars.
Damn, we've got to distract him. Order a pretzel flyby.
Yes, sir! Order pretzel flyby, sir!
A donut airplane towing an enormous pretzel veers towards Copzilla's head.
You chomped my wife, you enormous bastard. This one's for Shirley! The pilot dives toward Copzilla's head and then releases the pretzel, which whistles down towards its target. Copzilla follows the pretzel and begins plodding toward it, shaking the earth and quivering the balloon sports bar with every step. Gil follows behind in his Winchell sedan, wind in his face. Gil's eyes widen as Copzilla enters the bar. The pursuing planes and helicopters veer off.
Copzilla enters the giant balloon sports bar, where massive bowls of pretzels and corn chips sit awaiting him. Beers of many nations line the wall along with team pennants. A gurgling pot of nacho cheese sits on the counter. Copzilla plunges his huge paw into the bowl of chips.
Perfect. We have him just where we want him. Now if he'll only step on ground zero.
Looking down from the top of the inside of the giant sports bar, we see an X marked in the middle of a target circle. In his lust to stuff himself, Copzilla dances around it, consistently missing the X.
Above, we notice an enormous cauldron of hot nacho cheese. It bubbles, boils, and spews extremely hot, orangey liquid. The collected military brass tensely await the outcome. We close in on the glint of General Doman's binoculars. Steady? Steady? Hold it! Damn, he's still not quite there. Down below, Gil is perched nervously in his Winchell sedan. He looks up at Sugar Dough, dazed in Copzilla's shirt pocket.
If I don't do it, nobody will.
Gil zooms into the sports bar, heading straight for Copzilla's huge shiny shoes. Mayor Cruller and General Doman suddenly notice.
What's that idiot doing?
The mayor and general's staff's faces contort as we look back and forth between them and Gil in the speeding sedan.
Suddenly, as Copzilla stuffs yet another glob of corn chips into his mouth, Gil's little Winchell sedan crashes straight into Copzilla's giant, shiny black shoe. Copzilla stumbles backwards until he stands straight over the X spot.
Release nacho cheese! Yes, sir! Release nacho cheese, sir!
The hand of a donut soldier presses a red button, and from above, the bubbling cauldron of nacho cheese tips. Gears crank noisily and it starts to tilt. The immense pot of bubbling orange goop pours down on Copzilla. As Copzilla's hefty head looks upward with an expectant smile, it is met by tons of hot nacho goop landing with a direct hit. Copzilla doesn't have time to react as the melted cheese dip wells over him, covering him with 10 tons of blazing hot Velveeta. His muffled screams are quickly drowned out, and a small mountain of giant corn chips he's been holding in his hand tumble away, drifting downward.
Suddenly, we notice Sugar Dough jumping from Copzilla's lapel pocket and flying downwards toward what seems a certain death. Sugar Dough miraculously lands on one of those enormous corn chips, floats down, and softly comes to rest on a pile of huge pretzels. Pandemonium breaks out at military HQ as generals and politicians slap each other's backs. Mayor Cruller runs up and hugs his commanding officer, who looks on with a bittersweet smile.
General Doman, I can't thank you enough. You just got me reelected.
Around the city, we witness various scenes of happiness. Glazed sugar and old-fashioned donuts stand up in the rubble, cheering wildly.
In fashionable Eclair Heights, debutantes and country club hotshots clink cocktail glasses in celebration.
Superb job by the Defense Forces.
I'll miss the big fellow. He did some marvelous urban renewal work.
Back at the giant sports bar, Copzilla's last attempts at struggle are futile as nacho cheese solidifies him in place. Suddenly, all attention is concentrated on a person struggling out of the gloopy wreckage. It is Sugar Dough, who rises with great difficulty. As she stumbles forward, a horde of news vans and military vehicles pull up. Reporters push microphones in her face, while an overly ambitious wannabe agent helps her to her feet.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Miss Sugar Dough will have no comment.
Sugar pushes him out of the way as flashbulbs explode.
Oh, yes, I do. I want to write my memoirs. I want to star in a film based on my memoirs. I want my own talk show. I want my own media empire based on my talk show.
Sugar Dough continues babbling on, while in the background we see orange, cheese-covered Gil, slowly and with extraordinary effort, make his way out of the plastic nacho goop unnoticed.
Jesus, Crisco, Lord Almighty. There'll never be justice in the greasy city.
Months later, at the Donut Town Multiplex Cinema, we witnessed the gala opening of Sugar's new movie, Copzilla. The marquee above dazzles the community with its giant letters, most especially starring Sugar Dough. We notice a crowd of fashionable donut glitterati at the opening.
Well, Sugar got her wish. She's the biggest confection in Donut Town. Now the other gossip columnists are asking her questions.
We see Gil walk by a playground where donut children play, below an enormous orange statue of Copzilla. We see the big statue is the center of a huge amusement park. On a reviewing stand in the center of the amusement park, General Doman and his staff are being rewarded spreckles and other shiny cake decoration medals by Mayor Quiller. Eclair, that shady-looking bear claw executive we last saw back at the Blues Club, is standing there next to Mayor Crow.
Everything's back to normal now. Nobody but me seems to be asking why Bear Claw Security was developing a monster humanoid policeman hell-bent on destruction in the first place.
We see a shiny, rebuilt, and highly secure Bear Claw factory. In the surrounding neighborhoods, desperate ordinary donuts pick up rubble and hammer boards across broken windows.
I wrote an expose for the Daily Deep Fry where I proved the monster was financed by a mysterious group with an address in Eclair Heights. Guess what? My lousy editor wouldn't print it.
Gil looks through the editor's door back at the Daily Deep Fry and notices the editor surrounded by shady types, including Eclair. The door closes and we follow Gil walking away with his hat brim pushed up.
Honestly, I don't think Donut Society will ever change. Everybody's out for themselves, just like Sugar Dough. This town's got a collective hardening of the arteries. What else do you expect from a bunch of donuts?
We follow Gil around the corner into the new neighborhood where the architecture is different. We see little bagels playing in the streets while bagel shopkeepers tend to their storefronts.
I've had enough. I moved to Bagelburg where the citizens are baked, not deep fried. I'm working for an alternative paper these days. Whole Wheat.
At the offices of the Whole Wheat, we see groovy pastries working in a newsroom with macrame, plants, and progressive political posters covering every available space. Gil exits the office and heads down the street, where he is met by Babette, a croissant with bright red lipstick and a beret.
And get this, I'm dating a cute little croissant. Sure, Babette's kind of flaky. At least she cares about something besides herself.
Gil and Babette stroll happily up the street, with Babette's flakes falling off as they head into the distance.
I found it's important to believe in something. So, I guess you can't call me a real cynic. Because there's some things in life that still get a rise out of me. Even in the big Crisco.
Narration by Doug Nunn and Ken Krause, featuring Dan Sullivan as Gil Glazy and Christine Samus as Sugar Dough. Additional voices by Doug, Christine, and Ken. Copzilla was written by Doug Nunn, sound production and design by Ken Krause. Thanks for listening to Snap Sessions. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to us on Patreon. We depend on the support of listeners like you.
We're here with Gene Parsons. This is Snap Session interview. We finally get a chance to talk to Gene, and we're real excited about it. It's great to have you with us, Gene.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure, and it's going to be wonderful to get a chance to talk with you, Doug.
Yeah. I had read, I started to do research, and I feel kind of guilty about, like, gee, I wonder if they know I'm doing research. It's kind of a behind-the-back thing here, but at the same time, it makes sense. And I saw, when I was first asking you about the interview, you said you'd just gotten back from the desert. And I thought, gee, I wonder what that means. And it turns out, I think you were raised down in the desert, weren't you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Tell us about your desert rat upbringing down there.
Well, my dad was the original desert rat. He and my grandma moved out from Kentucky to Los Angeles for a couple of years when he was a kid. And then when he was in I guess he just turned 20. And he and my grandma moved out to the desert, which was really pretty in the outback back in those days. And she had bought a 5-acre piece that was sight unseen. And they lived in a tent for 3 years while he learned how to cowboy and work on Model Ts and stuff. Wow. And then they homesteaded 160 acres, one of the last homesteaders in that territory.
Yeah.
I was born in L.A., and when my parents split up, as a little guy, I spent the school year with my mom in Los Angeles, and then the summers with my dad. And then when I was 11, I moved out to the desert full time.
And that's, is it called Morongo Valley?
Well, Morongo Valley is part of that high desert area that's right around Joshua Tree National Park.
Right, yeah.
It's quite a bit different than the low desert area around Palm Springs and Indio and all those terrible places.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get the feeling that's more of the wild kind of. Also, the desert, as you get further up, it's kind of. It's completely different than it is low. I mean, it's still hot. Tell us about that.
Well, it is very much different. You're right in that. There's Joshua trees, and there's where the ranch is about 4,600 feet elevation in the valley, and it's surrounded by BLM wilderness at this point. And there's cottonwood trees and pinyon pine and just a lot of stuff growing there. At least there used to be. The climate change has taken its effect on that area, unfortunately, but it's still quite beautiful. Too built up now, although back around where the ranch is still in the outback.
I also read your dad, in some ways, your dad was a cowboy. And
he was. My dad was. He was a lot of things. He was actually an Olympic athlete, although he couldn't afford to go into really into it. But he did the H bars and the rings and high dive and all that sort of stuff. And then he became quite a good wrangler. Had to, and ran with I'm trying to remember the name. Was it the Stacy brothers? A couple different families that ran cattle and horses there, and he learned to wrangle. He could do all the rope tricks and all that sort of stuff.
Did he wrestle them? Did he wrestle cows down and that kind of stuff?
I don't know. I never saw him do that, but I imagine he probably had to. Yeah.
Well, I was figuring combining gymnastics background with, being an athlete and handling horses, he might have actually done something there.
Probably did, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I was just curious about
that.
He
used to intrigue us with the rope tricks.
Yeah. Did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
I've got 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Where are you in the
I'm the oldest.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Not a pretty picture.
Were you an easy to get along with brother?
No.
What made you tough?
Well, I had 2 special needs brothers. And so that was a little difficult growing up with that for everybody. But we made it, and my sister and I are very close. We get along really well. But no, I don't think I was too bad to get along with.
Yeah, you aren't now, so that must have been something.
Oh, you don't know me.
Well, yeah. Now, were you always a musician as a young man? Did you learn music in school, or did you learn from your family?
My mom was a classical pianist. And she was quite good. And she always wanted me to play the piano and tried to teach me to read music, which I rebelled against. But I was drawn to stringed instruments. And so, I started out with ukulele, and then she got me a guitar. And then my dad finally got me a banjo. And so I started out with string instruments at a pretty young age. And I never found out that my dad could play guitar until I was in my 30s. Oh. He picked up my guitar and played Old Man River. And I said, Dad, I didn't know you could play guitar. And he says, well, son, there's a lot you don't know about me, your old dad here. And I found out that he had played the barn dances and whatnot back when. And
That's wonderful. Especially, did you ever learn to play piano? I got to ask.
Me? I learned to play one song on the piano, and Mercy, Mercy, and that's all I can play on the piano, and it has to be in C.
Right. I was just curious because with a classical mom piano player, and your musical, capabilities, it seemed like you might have learned that too.
No, I never got. I don't know why I messed around with the piano, but I never was diligent enough to actually learn how to play the doggone thing.
What was the first band you were in? I read of one called the Castaways, I think, or something like that. But yeah,
the first band that I was involved with was the Castaways, and that's a kind of an odd story. I was working at the Dalton Tank Factory in the desert, welding up steel tanks, manufacturing steel tanks. And my friend Fuller Johnson and I would drive down to Hollywood on our days off and go into the coffee houses and go look around in the music stores and poke around. And there was one music store down there that had a beautiful Earl Scruggs model 5-string banjo in there. And I had a S.S. Stewart banjo, but this Scruggs banjo was beautiful. And I'd go in and I'd play it. And they had records and they had guitars and banjos. And they knew I couldn't afford to buy it, but they let me play. And one day I was in playing that banjo, and there were 3 guys came in, Gib Gilbo and his band, the Castaways, and they heard me play and said, hey, you play pretty good. He said, are you in the union? And I said, no. He said, well, you want to do a recording session? And I said, I've never done one before. He said, well, Taft-Hartley Act, you can get by with one. And you get paid. And so off we went and did a recording session with Lee Hazelwood, of all people.
Oh, wow. The Lee Hazelwood who later did Nancy Sinatra songs.
Yep, same one and the same. And after that, I figured that was a one-shot deal, and I went back to my tank factory, welding up tanks out in the desert. And 2 weeks later, I came home, and my dad and I were batching, and Dad says, hey, this guy Gib Gilbo called. He wants you to go on the road. And I said, on the road, goodness. So I call up Gib, and Gib says, Gene, he said, would you like to go on the road with us and play? He said, how much money you're making at the Dalton Tank Factory? And I told him, he said, well, you'd make twice as much, and we have an apartment rented for you in Burbank. I said, really? So I quit my job at Dalton, arrived with my banjo, and said, oh, I forgot to tell you. He said, you won't be playing so much banjo. You'll be our bass player. And I said, I don't know how to play bass. And he says, oh, anyone can play the banjo, can play the bass, and we have a bass for you. So that was the beginning of my so-called professional career. And I was with that band for about a year and a half, all over Nevada mostly, and Navy bases, and, we played at a lot of casinos in Elko, Nevada, and Searchlight, Nevada, and Hawthorne, Nevada. And
you played every hot place in Nevada, and you moved from place to place, and there are a lot of military bases out there too.
Well, and in California as well.
In California. I recall being down there. Tracy and I played an Air Force base down there just off the road from L.A. to Vegas. There's some big Air Force base. Maybe you played it too.
I hadn't played that one, but I know where it is. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the town.
Was it Lancaster?
Someplace out there. Well, I'll come back to it later, I know. But anyway, I remember we played a non-commissioned officers club. We were I was being irreverent and sort of doing military jokes, stuff like that. and I had afterwards this massive discussion with all these sergeants. And they were terrific. They were smart. They were well-read. They went after me. We had a good laugh, though. I really enjoyed that, and that was out in the middle of the desert.
I wonder if you could still have that kind of a conversation today in today's climate.
I wonder, too, Gene.
Boy.
So you also, it seems like, so you've been playing with Gib Gilbo, and you're playing bass with Gib, and you had been seen as a potential banjo player, and then you got involved with Clarence White, looks like.
What happened was, there's a little bit of stuff in between. Gib Gilbo was from Opelousas, Louisiana. He was a Cajun fiddle player, a good one. And after about a year and a half, the group Castaways broke up, and Gib went back to Opelousas. He wanted to be a tugboat captain. That was his aspiration. And I went back to the desert and went to work in an automotive machine shop and was playing bass in Palm Springs and 29 Palms on the weekends. For about a year and a half, I bought a house, got married, had a child, and I get a phone call from Gib Gilbo. "Hey, Gene, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm working in a machine shop here." And he says, "How much money are you making?" And he said, "Well, how would you like to make twice as much? I'm not in Opelousas anymore. I'm over here just about 150 miles from you over in Palmdale, and we're playing at a club called the Jack of Diamonds. We're playing 7 nights a week in a double set of sets on Sunday. And twice as much, and we got a house over here that we could rent for you." And I said, "Well, I just bought a house, and I got a kid. I mean, really?" He says, "Twice as much." So I gave my notice, sold my house in 2 weeks, drove to Palmdale, arrived with my bass, and I walk up to the Jack of Diamonds, and Gib meets me at the door and says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, you're our drummer." And I said, "You little bastard." And he said, "Well, we bought you a set of drums. I hope you like the color blue. They're inside there." And I said, "Gib, I don't know how to play drums." He says, "They're all drunk in there anyway. They won't know the difference." He says, "It's a kind of a, earn as you learn situation for you." And so I played in that club for 3 years, 7 nights a week with a double set of shows on Sunday. And I sort of learned how to play the drums.
I guess so. 3 nights. I read that. I read a book about Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about it takes 10,000 hours to learn something really well. And he talks about the Beatles playing in Hamburg, how the Beatles played 7 nights a week and over and over and over again, months after months after months. And he claims that's the way you reach a level of competence. It strikes me that you were forced to be a drummer.
I was forced to be a drummer. That's it, Doug.
Yeah.
But then you asked the question about Clarence White.
Right.
So we were doing a recording session, and I was a fan of Clarence's when he was in the Kentucky Colonels. I'd never met him. And we were doing a session with Clarence White. And he was just learning to play the electric guitar. He even still used a capo on the electric guitar. And we did this session. I was going, holy mackerel, this guy can play guitar. Wow. And he was getting out of bluegrass because there was no money. He had a kid. He was trying to make enough money to live. Tired of, sleeping in the back of the van. And said, "Well, would you like to play with us at the Jack of Diamonds?" And he said, "Sure." Clarence came and played with us, and we moved to another club called the Nashville West in El Monte, and we played there for about a year, 7 nights a week still. And it was really quite a wonderful music scene back in those days. And Clarence was learning the electric guitar really fast. And so that's how I met Clarence.
And so from this Nashville West and Clarence situation, you end up working with Clarence on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And then there's a certain point when Clarence is approached by the Byrds to join up. Fill us in on that.
Well, he had actually recorded with the Byrds a bunch on some of their previous records. And when Sweetheart of the Rodeo came out, and they had the steel guitar stuff on there, and I had just put the string bender on Clarence's guitar. We had done that. That's another story. But
we're going to talk about the string bender momentarily because that's revolutionary.
So he could do the steel guitar licks, and so they wanted him to go with the group. and he came to the band and said, "Do you think I should do it?" And we all said, "Are you kidding? Go." But I don't want to leave you guys, And he said, "Leave us, go." So he did, and not too long after that, they needed a drummer, and so Clarence was instrumental in getting me in on that. So I did an audition, and they hired me.
And that was 68 or something like
67.
that? 67. So then you joined the Byrds with Clarence White, and the Byrds had been through a number of different changes by then, I guess, because they had started out sort of an electrified folk band or something, maybe 64-ish or something like that.
Yeah. They were still the original members, except for Crosby was gone.
Right.
And shortly after I joined, Chris Hillman went with Graham Parsons and formed the Flying Burrito Brothers. And we got another guy, John York, to play bass. And John lasted for about a year or so, and then we got Skip Batten, which ended up being a long-term relationship.
They didn't force you to be bass player, too, be drums. You'd be the one-man rhythm section.
Fortunately, no, they did not do that. Yeah.
Now, you're being a drummer for the Byrds, and they also, around that era, this is just after Sweetheart of the Rodeo, I think, they also hit stride when the Easy Rider album comes out. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to the movies. I think I was just before my senior year of high school, that movie came out. And, of course, I was blown out. I bought the album. And I got that album where you're one of the four heads of the Byrds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the Best of Byrds album.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, I loved all that stuff. That whole era with you and stuff. You must have been working up a storm in those times.
We were on the road. That's my dog, Tazzy May. Apparently there's somebody at the gate, but...
Cameo appearance.
Quiet, Tazzy. Taz, that's enough. Where were we?
We were talking about...
I got run over by my train of thought.
Yeah, you did. I was just talking about you must have been busy because that was a time of kind of resurgence of major fame for the Byrds and a lot of gigging and stuff.
We were gigging a whole lot. We were mostly on the East Coast, Midwest, and some on in Canada and Europe. And I have to tell you that the picture on the front of that Easy Rider album, that's my dad.
Really?
That's my dad in his 1928 Harley Davidson. The art department kind of dolled up his face a little bit so they wouldn't have to pay royalties. Anyway, I've got the original pictures hanging right up there.
I'll be darned. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was a huge fan, and I, like I said, that era, I became a big Byrds fan, and I had been...
Well, Doug, that doesn't make you a bad person.
You sort of had a country music background, but you were also, kind of, a variety of contemporary rock and roll kind of stuff, too.
I was never really into rock and roll. I was more into folk and bluegrass. I mean, I was raised on the Weavers and Pete Seeger and Cisco Houston and Huddy Ledbetter and that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff my mom, introduced me to, and that was. And then when I heard Earl Scruggs, I went, "Oh yeah, that's what I want to do. Play that banjo like that."
So you were playing drums for the Byrds, and your deep heart sort of thing was to be doing bluegrass and folk music too.
Honestly, yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed playing the drums, and I enjoy rock and roll, and I enjoy jazz. Listening to it, I can't play jazz really, but no, that's where my heart is bluegrass, folk, and country, old country.
And at this point, I'm just curious. Here you are playing drums for big shot touring band, international recognition. Were you hankering to be playing banjo and all of that more often than doing drums?
Oh, I definitely wanted to be playing the banjo, and I had started playing the pedal steel too, and that was really, how should I say, that's a rabbit hole that if you go down, you never come out, But I was enjoying playing the drums, especially with Clarence, because Clarence was so rhythmic with his playing, and so we worked off of each other, and Skip too, but So it was fun playing. I had fun playing the drums.
Yeah, yeah. And what led you away? Sooner or later, you left the Byrds and you became a Burrito Brother, right?
I did. The manager of the Byrds, Eddie Tickner, and who was also my manager, gave me a call one time up here and said, Gene, he said, the Burrito Brothers, since Graham died and everything, they no longer exist. But if I had a band called the Burrito Brothers right now, I could book it. And I could get you a CBS contract. Can you put together a reformation of the Burritos? So I called Sneaky Pete, who was a friend.
You got to tell me who Sneaky Pete is. When I was reading biographical stuff, I said, I got to know more about Sneaky Pete.
Well, Sneaky Pete was a phenomenal pedal steel guitar player. Phenomenal and unique. He played a tuning that nobody plays. He played an old 8-string Fender 400 pedal steel that he must have got when he was a kid. And he also worked with Art Clokey and did the Gumby cartoons. He was an animator and did all those ads on TV with all the claymation stuff.
Yeah.
He was just a real character. Where was I? Oh, so I called Sneaky and I said, Sneaky, would you like to, reform the group? He says, yeah, sure. So, okay. And then Chris Etheridge was living in Copzilla. And I was friends with him and had recorded with him. And I said, Chris, how about you? You were original member. Yeah, sure. He wanted to do it. I called Gib. Gib and I were actually considered to be part of the Burritos when they were forming back when. And Gib said, yeah, you bet. And then Joel Scott Hill from Canned Heat lived up here then, and we were friends. And he knew all the songs and was a great lead singer and a good guitar player. And so we reformed the Flying Burrito Brothers, got a CBS recording contract, and went on the road.
How long were the revisited Flying Burritos group?
Well, that group lasted about 3 years when Chris dropped out of the group, and we got Skip Batten to play bass. And then that continued on for another 2-3 years. So I would say 6 years.
Now, I had asked you before we started the interview, I mentioned that I moved up to Mendocino in the summer of 77.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you had been here since 69. And I thought, holy mackerel, I didn't know you'd been here that long. What brought you to Mendocino?
Skip Batten. Skip Batten moved out of Laurel Canyon and moved to moved to Navarro and bought a place right on the river there. And I was going through a divorce, and he said, Gene, you ought to come up and look at this place up here. I was looking to get out of L.A. I hated living in L.A. And being a country boy. And so I drove up, looked at his place, went to Copzilla, looked at a place there, came to the coast, talked with a guy who showed me the place next door here, bought it, drove to my dad's, who was living in Butte County over here at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Went there, drove back down to Los Angeles, got on a plane, went to Europe for 10 weeks, toured, came back, loaded a few things that I had in a trailer, came up here, and I could not find my house. I had to go find the realtor to show me where I lived, and been here ever since.
Yeah. So at this piece of land.
Well, this one right next door that belongs to my ex-wife, Camille, who we're still friends.
Yeah.
And then I bought this place here, the acre that we're sitting on right here, which we've added to, but I bought it. It was bare. Well, it wasn't bare. It was full of, you couldn't walk through it. There was trees everywhere, the pygmy trees and whatnot and scrub and all. But they wanted $3,500 for this piece of property, and I paid $3,200 for it.
You were driving a hard bargain.
You know it, yeah.
You see, this is the thing about Gene. You don't mess with these desert folk, I mean.
Well, my dad was a horse trader.
So it runs in the family. That's good. I know you've mentioned all kinds of musicians that you've worked with, and that's been ongoing. Just looking in the bio, you've played with Vassar Clements, Arlo Guthrie, and you've also done a lot of music on your own with various people. The Gene Parsons Trio, Parsons Green, and lots of local people. Any other stories you're dying to tell us about some of the folks you've worked with?
Gosh. I actually recorded with Malvina Reynolds.
Oh, yes.
And
And she did little boxes made of ticky-tacky.
Yep. I never got to meet her, but I overdubbed Alex Hasseliv of the Limelighters.
Oh, yeah.
Was producing her. Mm-hmm. And I put banjo and guitar and drums and bass and I don't know on all. She had just done all the basic tracks with her guitar.
Yeah.
And I went and overdubbed, and that was fun. I missed not getting to see her though and meet her. Phil Oakes was really had fun with him.
Yeah. Look outside your window. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also was a big fan in that era. Of course, I would have been watching Hootenanny on television or something like that. I was a big fan of the Limelighters and the Kingston Trio and a lot of those bands growing up, a lot of those groups growing up. A huge fan of the Lime. I loved Glenn Yarborough's voice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
He came and he played here at one time at Crown, not at Cotton.
I'll be darned.
Many years ago.
Yeah. He had a beautiful voice.
Yep.
Ken, do you remember Glenn Yarborough?
Yes.
Yeah. I do. Yeah, he had a voice. Ken Krause is here recording with us. So
I also was very fond of Phil Oakes, and I saw him play at a demonstration in Washington D.C. for the moratorium against the war, and he was amazing. He was just a really he should have been a bigger star or whatever. He should have been better known. Let's put it that way.
Phil Oakes, definitely underrated and a great songwriter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a good performer.
Yes.
A tortured soul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, tragic end to his life because he had been injured I think it was in Africa or something. He got his vocal cords where he hit him in the throat, and he never was able to get the range he had before. It was really, it really preyed on him, but.
You need a microphone, Ken.
Well, I'll just talk about it.
Well,
But thank you. That when you said that, I was like, yes, somebody mentioned Phil Oakes because he is undervalued.
A really nice man.
Yes.
He was really a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Very
Definitely.
dedicated activist.
Yep.
Yeah, and Gene is also an activist. You've been involved with all kinds of stuff. I know when you were playing with Parsons Green, you guys did a lot of green work. Tracy and I actually opened for you guys a couple of times. This would probably be Crown Hall and stuff. But
I recall that.
yeah, we did Enviro type shows together and stuff. So yeah. So I just happened to be wearing a Green New Deal T-shirt today, and Gene commented on that.
I was admiring it there.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not going to make it out of the shop with this T-shirt. So I got to ask you now about the story of the string bender, because we are sitting in Gene Parsons' metal shop, machine shop, and Gene is the inventor of the string bender, which is a famous device that he developed for Clarence White. And can you tell this story, because it is a fascinating story about Clarence asking you about, can you do this for me?
Well, Clarence was one of the innovators of a little lick on the Telecaster guitar where he would chime the B string or the E string, the high E string, and then he would pull it over the nut, behind the nut where the tuning pegs are, and bring it up a full tone like a pedal steel guitar. And we were doing a session with the Gosden brothers, and he asked me, he says, you know what, Gene, I wish I had a third hand. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I want to do that lick, the nut, I want to do it at the second and third position up the neck. I said, well, I'll be your third hand. Let's try it. And so I know what you're doing there. Chime it and I'll pull the string. And so he, held the position on the neck, and he chimed with his right hand, and I pulled him. We heard the sound. We didn't use it on the recording. We went, ooh, that's a really cool sound. That's really cool. So he says, well, Gene, you're a mechanic. You're a machinist. Make me something that'll do that. And I said, it's easy. We'll get Sneaky Pete to give us some steel guitar parts, and we'll get some cables and put some foot pedals down on the floor. And he went, no, wait. He says, I don't want to play the pedal steel guitar. I want it all to go in the guitar. I want to be able to put the guitar in the case. I don't want to take my hands out of their stance. Think of something. Well, there was a guy in San Diego that you'll see people do a volume swell with their little finger on the volume knob on their guitar, where they make it swell like a pedal steel guitar. And he was doing that with his shoulder strap on he had a lever attached to the attenuator to the volume attenuator. So and it was spring loaded, and he'd push the neck down, and I went, there, we use the shoulder strap. And so I got Sneaky Pete to give me a bunch of parts off a steel guitar that he had there, and I drew up all the plans and showed Clarence, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to have to get another guitar while you're working on it," which he did. And then he offered up his old Telly to the string bender god, and I took it, and the first thing I had to do was cut an 1.25 square out of the body. That's the old style. These are all the new style, but the original one was where I was incorporating these very big steel guitar mechanisms into this poor little Telecaster. So I cut this piece of 1.25 square out, and went to have coffee with him. We had coffee every morning, and I went over and I slung this little sunburst finished square of wood over to him, and he went, "Oh boy," he says, "we're past the point of no return, aren't we?" I said, "Yep, we are." He said, "I hope you know what you're doing." I says, "Yeah, I hope I know what I'm doing too." But it worked. With a little tweaking, it worked really well, and he figured out a way to use it. He invented the way to play it, which Marty Stewart and a lot of people use now. Marty's got the original guitar that I built back in '67, and he plays it like it should be played. Yeah.
I have to say that one line, and on such moments, we go back in time and look at changes in history. On such moments as Clarence White going, "You're a mechanic, figure it out." I just love that, because there's a moment there when Gene Parsons goes, "Okay, I'll give it a go." And that particular moment, it changes musical history in a way,
Well, I think it's interesting. It's just happenstance. It's luck. It's situations that arise, and you just happen to be at the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you also got to figure it out, though. Now, I got to point out to you in terms of inventions, because you got an inventive mind. My grandpa, mother's father, worked in the Mare Island Naval Shipyard for years.
Yeah.
And he was a South Dakota farm boy, spoke German as a first language, and then managed to get into the shipyard. He was an electrician. And while he was working there, they were always dropping screws in submarine parts and stuff like that. He's one of the inventors of one of those things that's a little grabber thing where you push the top and the little devices come out and
I've got one in my toolbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pappy Heeb, my grandpa, George Heeb, was one of the inventors of that. He got a $25 check from the government and a certificate. He ended up inventing 3 other devices for the United States Navy, and always got $25 and a gift certificate.
How lucky!
Yeah, he got it. Got written up, but that was about it. And you're in the wrong place at the right time. In his particular thing, he's working for the Navy, but that particular invention's pretty cool.
Oh, it's way cool, and it has gotten me out of a lot of bad situations.
What do you call it? That particular thing?
Oh gosh. The grabber?
The grabber? Yeah. I was thinking the nut grabber, although that brings up some major quirky responses there.
My dad used to walk, kids would come in the shop and he'd have a big crescent wrench and he says, "Shall we tighten your nuts?"
Now, Now, the string bender, as you mentioned, we have a whole bunch of guitar buddies up here. Presumably, do you work now on getting an order from somebody, and then do they send you a guitar body, and then do you build it?
I do both. Mostly, these guitars that you see here are mostly customers' guitars that were sent to me to put string benders. Bless their hearts, they send me their guitar with a check in the case. And they wait for 6 to 8 weeks while I, do the operation on their guitar. So it's kept us in pretty good stead here for 50 years.
Yeah, 50 years you've been doing it.
I know.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Well, it is amazing because, it's something that not everybody knows about, but you've been doing it for 50 years. I have to say, for our SnapSessions listeners, he has a bunch of guitars, looks like about a dozen here, where he bores out a section, and I guess it's very specifically done, and then he fits in the string bender there into the guitar body. And I was curious. Would it be possible for you to demonstrate what a chord sounds like with or without a string bender?
I can probably do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, would that be something, Ken? We could maybe pause or something, and Gene could demo that.
You want to do that at the end of the?
We could do that at the end.
Sure.
We can do that at the end. Yeah, I would very much like to see that. Because I think it would be really great. Now, I was thinking too, it might be fun if you could point out some stuff about how you work in the machine shop. We're sitting here in the machine shop, and it looks like a metal shop, except kind of crowded. I mean,
it's really crowded, and I even got rid of, right here where we're sitting, I had a milling machine that I gave to a local luthier, Morgan Daniel, because I wasn't using it so much, and he needed it, and I needed the room. Yeah, I considered building onto the shop, but then I would just fill that up too, and I don't want to get too big. So, yeah, it's crowded. Yeah, and you're looking at Gene Parsons. I'm a Victorian that's trapped in the 21st century. And none of these machines are numerical control. They're all ancient machines, except for this one's a fairly new machine.
Yeah.
But like that 1928 South Bend metal lathe there, and a 1905 American lathe, and these two Atlas lathes are probably from the late 30s, early 40s. I just like to do it all by hand.
I found that in some of the research I was doing, you talked about, and I love the fact that you knew this, you talked about you had rebuilt some banjos from Great Britain. And somehow they fell into your hands, and you started working on them, and then you related some interesting facts. You said you didn't realize it, but once you started looking it up, you found out there had been 100 makers of banjos in England, or in Britain, about 100 plus years ago.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. And then you had started rebuilding these banjos. So that level of knowledge of the instrument and of instrument making, and it's really phenomenal. I mean, you get into it.
Well, it's not rocket science. It's all just, basic stuff, common sense stuff, but it does take a little finesse and a little experience. I mean, I'm constantly making mistakes and learning every day, so.
Yeah. You say it's not rocket science, but without guys like you, there wouldn't be no rockets.
Well, that's true.
And there certainly wouldn't be any music on the rocket ship to listen to.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated by this because here we're talking to a guy who's, had a great music career, who's toured with all kinds of big name bands, etc., but is also very knowledgeable about nuts and bolts and inventing. And as I mentioned about my grandpa, I've always been super impressed by people who can solve problems, invention problems. And whenever people underestimate the sort of the crafts part of life, it really bothers me.
Well, you're really getting into an area that is one of my pet peeves, and that's that they've taken the manual arts out of the school system in America. And this leaves an awful lot, I think the lion's share of kids, kind of in the lurch because they don't even realize they want to be doing things with their hands. They're not academics. They're not going to do well until they learn that they need to manifest life with their hands. And to have manual arts not be part of our education system is a real detriment to this society, I think.
Yeah. I'm so glad you say that. Number one, I'm a firm believer in exactly what you say. We need metal shops and wood shops and like Francis Rutherford, who we've also interviewed for this show.
Mm-hmm.
You are the second person to mention the word luthier in a SnapSessions interview because Francis mentioned luthier, and at the time we were interviewing him last fall, I didn't know what a luthier was. And I felt like a knucklehead not knowing. But here you are now because Francis has educated us on it. You're mentioning it, and I actually know somebody who builds stringed instruments or fixes violins and guitars and so forth.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, this is just the fact that you have this thing. And he also has a bunch of, looks like practical manuals for working on instruments and metal shoppy stuff, or is that something else?
Well, yeah. Actually, a lot of those up there are. I'm a Victorian, trapped in the 21st century, and a steam power nut. And so I've got a whole lot of manuals that are ancient about steam engineering and the old methods of machining and whatnot. And so I've got quite a book collection. I've been trying to thin it out because they kind of overwhelmed me. But yeah, I collect old books on Victorian engineering.
Yeah, and apropos that, I got to ask too. You had on one of the videos I was watching, you had built a steam whistles.
Uh-huh.
You actually make them here. You fabricate them.
Yes, I do, and boilers and steam engines.
Tell us a little bit about that too.
Well, I mean, I as a kid in the desert, we were about 40 miles from the Southern Pacific line there, and we'd hear the Cab Ford Malleys coming through there. You could hear the whistles on a cold, still day. You could hear them 40 miles away. And my dad would take me down. My grandma lived in Beaumont there, and I'd go down to the train depot and watch them go through and take water and whatnot. And it did something to me. Those steam engines, poor kids these days, they don't get to see that kind of stuff. I mean, the closest thing they've got to it is probably the space shuttle, which now we don't have anymore. Anyway, I became a steam nut, along with other things, motorcycles, and just a hopeless terminal motorhead. I wanted to build steam whistles and boilers. And so I built a shop boiler, a couple of them. And I actually had my shop powered on steam for a while. Someone came and bought the whole system that I built. So I built another one, a smaller one. And I built 5 chime whistles, 3 chime whistles, and even have a steam locomotive outside that I built, a 1/8 size steam locomotive.
Right here on the land?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll take a look at that too.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. I loved hearing about this kind of stuff, and the fact that you've had such an interesting life, both in music and in fabrication. I guess you'd say, fabricating things. In a way, if you could, you mentioned about being a Victorian steam nut and so forth. If you could go back in time and be with any particular group of musicians. What might you be gravitating toward? Yeah.
Oh my! I might want to go and play with Jimmy Rogers, the singing brakeman. Yep, somebody like that.
That would be a great combination of your love for trains and your love of country music.
Yeah, there you go.
Did you happen to see the Ken Burns documentary about country music?
Wasn't that fantastic?
I loved it.
His documentaries are. He's got a great team around him. They do the best documentaries. They really do. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
The one on jazz, too. Whoa.
I learned so much.
Yeah.
I learned so much. And the one on country music, I've told a couple people, if you only watch one, although it's hard to just say that, I would watch episode 3, the one about Hank Williams. It's mostly about Hank Williams.
Yeah.
What a life. At 29 years old, he was gone.
Oh, I know it.
A whole nother album came out after he died.
He had that all in the can.
Yeah.
I actually played with Bud Isaacs, who was his steel player for a while. And Bud actually stayed at my house in Palmdale for a week and played with us. He got me really involved in pedal steel. And he was the inventor of the pedal steel. He was the first one to put pedals on the steel guitar, was Bud Isaacs, God rest his soul.
I think that might be a SnapSessions exclusive. Yeah, we might have gotten Gene to talk about Bud Isaacs.
Breaking news.
Yeah. Should we do a pause here and then set up for...
We could do that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to ask of Gene? Or
I'm just loving listening.
This has been great.
You're great. You're both a great storyteller, and you've got the experience to back it up.
Yeah,
well,
you're a great storyteller.
Great, you guys are awesome, and it's great fun talking to you. And as I said before, a real honor. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're delighted to have you. I mean, I get the feeling we could go around shopping 3 hours later, we'd still be talking.
Well, we never got into politics yet.
Yeah, that's true. We could just do a couple.
There's another whole day, right?
Yeah,
there.
right. That's true. Yeah, that's true for sure.
Conservatively, and
Yeah.
I don't mean politically.
Ken and I, SnapSessions actually does a fair amount. We do a lot of eco stuff on our show, and We do a fair amount of political stuff. In fact, I have to sort of slow myself down to remind ourselves, let's do a funny one this month. Ken reminds me, Doug, let's do a funny one this month. You get into...
You have to temper the message with a little humor. Yeah.
Exactly.
When he does something about, the smell was terrible from the coal plant or whatever, and I'll put a fart noise in, just to kind of, hey, bring a smile to people. But also that way, I think people let their guard down and listen a little bit more to the message.
I agree.
It makes it much more available to the public at large. Yeah. I think you're right. We'll get this acoustic tuned up here.
Okay. Gene's tuning up his acoustic, and he's going to give us a demo of something he's going to play with an acoustic guitar, and then something he's going to use the string bender on.
Well, actually, yeah. What I'm going to do, if you were playing an A chord and you wanted to, like that, with the string bender, you can do it like this. You probably heard that sound on the radio or on your record player. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing down on the neck, which lets the shoulder strap pull a lever up, which is spring-loaded. So when I push down on the neck, it pulls that B string up a full tunable note. So that's what a string bender is. There you go.
Wow, great. That's great. So, and like I said, he's got here, I'd say there it looks like the dozen ones that he's working on right now. And people send you guitars from all over the world, right?
They do. I've gotten guitars from Poland and Japan and goodness gracious. Yeah, but mostly American, and Canadian and English. The English really like string benders and they send them to me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, thanks for that. And I got one other thing I have to tease you about.
Are you going to tease me?
Yeah, I can't help it. I went to see Doctor Strange #2 about a week and a half ago.
I have to see that. I've heard it's really good.
Well, it's pretty good, yeah. And I saw Benedict Cumberbatch has eyes that are similar to yours. And I have to tell people who haven't seen Gene's eyes, Gene has these beautiful pale blue eyes that are pretty remarkable. That one particular Best of the Birds album has with your four or five of you are like in profile. And then you get to Gene's eyes, and Gene's eyes, it's a black and white picture, but Gene's eyes stand out as this really kind of pretty blue. And I had just been watching a bunch of videos about you. And then I went to see Cumberbatch.
Poor fella.
So there's Dr. Strange, and I'm saying to myself, Dr. Strange has Gene Parsons' eyes. I'm not kidding. So I'm watching. Yeah, exactly.
Well, they wrote that song about me, Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those peepers?
Yeah, for future reference, I think we ought to keep that in the interview for sure. Yeah. So, Gene Parsons meet Benedict Cumberbatch. So
well, I'm a big fan of his. Boy, what an actor. Holy
he's great. He's really fun. I really enjoyed
One of my favorite TV shows is still the Sherlock one.
Oh, yeah.
Those are great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How does he remember all that stuff and rattle up? I heard an interview with him where Power of the Dog, he actually stayed in the same clothes and didn't take a shower for like 11 days so that he could actually be that guy.
Yeah.
And he never got out of character the whole time.
Well, I guess the character is like a chain smoker, is constantly smoking, and he's not a smoker, but for the part, he did, and he got nicotine poisoning 3 times during the course of filming.
That's freaking dedication, man, I'll tell you.
A little bridge too far.
He's the real deal. He's a real actor.
Yes,
Yeah.
Totally.
And he's got Gene Parsons' eyes. Just throwing that in there. So.
Oh, Doug, can't take him anywhere. Can you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, well, great. I think we've.
Thank you, you guys. Thanks.
Man, you have been great. I got to tell you, man, I'm giving you one of those. Anyway, Gene, I was terrific. I mean, we've been so lucky. We've had a lot of really interesting people on, But having you and having your story, you get the extra kick from Gene Parsons is the storytelling. It's perfect for our show, and it's really great that way. I'm so glad you were here for this, Ken, because mostly it's me. I have a little handheld Zoom thing. What's it called? It's a Zoom
Just a Zoom portable recorder.
It's pretty good, but
Wow.
it wouldn't be as good as Ken. Ken sets up nice.
I wanted
and he
this
does.
to be.
You got the good mics out.
Yeah, he does.
And
He
I
gets
got the good stands, which Gene loves.
Hey, there you go.
That's great.
All right, that's it.
Yeah. Thanks to our artist activists of the show, musician and inventor Gene Parsons. Our production team includes Techmeister Marshall Brown, Jack of all trades Ken Krause, writer-interviewer Doug Nunn, and our logo designer Daniel Stieglitz. Don't be an airhead. Get out there and do something creative. Dabble in something that inspires you. Read something challenging. Expand your perspective. Our aim is to give you an international outlook on the arts and a critical look at world politics. Salute the power of creativity and foster international solidarity. Make Mother Earth great again.
Support for Snap Sessions is brought to you by listeners who contribute generously at our link, patreon.com/Snap Sessions, or through the link in the Snap Sessions website, thesnapsessions.com, and also the link in our show notes.